Hey, how you guys doing? So this is Neil from masterpaintnow.com bringing you another free art lesson. I'm one of the top art instructors on Udemy with over 30,000 happy students, all growing and learning. So grow with us. All right, let's get started. All right, hey, how you doing? So in this video, I'm going to be showing you guys how to do watercolor in Rebelle 3. Now this is using traditional watercolor techniques, and something I love. It's probably my favorite medium to work with when it comes to traditional is watercolor. It's just really fun. I can do it really fast. Anyway, but I'm able to translate with the powerful engine that this thing has with real watercolor and simulated water. It's so good. There's no other program like this on the market when it comes to watercolors. And it's really the only thing I like about the program. Actually, that's not the only thing I like. I also really like the pencils. So what you're looking at right now is I wasn't actually going to record this when I started working on it. And then after I got about this far into it, I'm like, you know what, I should probably start recording this because it's going to be, I think, really good. And I can show a lot of different things about watercolors by recording it. This was drawn in Rebelle 3 as well with their pencil tool, which is right here. The pencils really do look good. They really look like traditional pencils. It's really nice, and they really nailed that down really well too. Their acrylics is okay. It's not too bad, and their pastels are alright, and chalk and stuff. I mean, it looks pretty realistic and works kind of like the traditional would. All right, let's go ahead and play this, so we can go through with it. Now, some of you guys might be offended by the subject matter of this painting. It is, it's part of my symbolism collection and has a lot of symbolic meaning behind it. And really, there's a lot of different meanings behind it, and I can see a lot of people reading a lot of different meanings into it. Now, right here, I'm going to show you a cool trick. So here, I already have laid down one little layer of color right here. Now, this tool I use a lot. So this basically damps the paper. So what you want to do is use this tool here, this little water drop here. This just puts water on the paper. So I'm just coloring it in with just water, nothing but water. Now after you have the water where you want it, this is going to be the part of the paper that's damp. Then you're going to hit this button over here, which is the damp tool. Make sure to do this, otherwise you're going to have uneven water and it's not going to work right. What this does is it damps, like as if you took a towel and just kind of damped your paper, so it has a nice damp wetness to it. So when you do wet on wet, it'll spread really nicely. I like really controlled wet on wet when I work with watercolors, not like this crazy just bloom looking that to me doesn't look good. So here I'm just putting, and I'm slightly overlapping the water that's already there. That's all dry right now. I hit the dry button, which is here, and that dries all the water on that layer. And now I hit the damp button. Now notice all the water looks the same. Now you can't see the water anymore because you can turn this icon here off and on to be able to see the water. I like to be able to see it for a second. Now I'm using the blur tool. Technically that's what it is, but it works more like allowing it to be able to spread at the edges, to have a nice spread to it. It's really cool, and to me it's more like using the tool when you use traditional watercolor and you put a little bit of color on the paper down, and then after you kind of spread it out, then you take your brush, dip it in pure water, and then clean it and then wipe it on your towel a couple times to where it's almost dry, just barely damp. Then you can kind of lift some of that paint and pull it and kind of blend it out really easily. It's a really cool technique. It gives you a lot of control and a lot of like nice blended edges. It looks really nice for portraits and stuff. So now I'm laying in some of the color that I want there. Now notice I press the pause button. The pause button pauses all the action of the water. So right now I'm just painting in color where I want it to spread. Now it's only going to spread where that water is. So as long as you color it, now I unpaused it, and now notice it only spreads where I had that water at. That's how watercolor works too. If you just get your paper damp in only one area and everything else is dry, and then you take a little bit of just a damp brush with a little bit of paint on it, and you paint in that area and then let go, it'll spread only to that area where it's damp. It's not going to go outside of that area, unless you really push it and turn the paper and kind of shake it and get it to drip outside of it. So now what I'm doing is I'm adding different colors within that skin. So I start with my lightest value first. And that lightest value in this case was kind of a yellowish skin tone. And then I go ahead and I start using oranges. Now notice here, what I wanted to see if I can accomplish with Rebelle 3, and I was able to do it, as you can see here. And when you see the finished piece, I might show the finished piece in the beginning like I usually do. Hopefully I remember to do that. But when you have the I'm not going to go through this whole thing, by the way, step by step. I'm just, this part right here really shows. But what I want to do is pure transparent. So notice I'm not having the color go over here to the left-hand side at all. It has to stay only on the right-hand side, meaning that's pure color. So if I was working with watercolors, this is only using, you know, black and the purest color and water. So if I want a lighter color, I just add more water to it. I don't add white. Once you add white, white is opaque. No matter if it's, even if it's a transparent white, it's still going to have a little bit of like chalkiness to it, a little bit of opaqueness to it. And that's going to ruin that nice, awesome translucency that the watercolors have. So anyway, I wanted to simulate that with this program, because if you do start to go over here in this color area where you have the whites and stuff like that, that is, you start, you know, getting the color to look lighter by adding white to it, or even gray, then what happens is the end result looks more like gouache or something, which is really cool and it's fun to work. I still like using this program that way. But if you want that nice traditional translucent look, then you want to stick to the right hand side. Now the main trick here that I show, if you haven't looked over here yet at the settings, let's go back here really quick and look at that. So notice that when I'm painting, right now I'm blending that out. Let's go back when I was actually painting. Okay, here we go. So I have the loading. This is how much paint is on the brush. So let me go through what this is. This is the size of your brush. This right here is the pressure of the brush. That is kind of like your opacity, sort of like how much, you know, how hard you have to push to get the paint to come out. This is, the loading is how much paint is on your brush, no matter what brush you're using. If it's acrylic brush or watercolors, it's how much paint is loaded on your brush. This is how much water is loaded on the brush. You don't really want to go over 50%. I've noticed that. It just doesn't work very well. And you can do it, but it's going to give you that look as if you had a really, really wet brush. And if you like that look, that's cool, but I like a nice controlled look. So I like to stick 50% or lower. So what you do then is you have the water there and you hit the damp button so it's all unified. And then you have a very, very low loading. So 9 works good. Anywhere like 13 to like 7 to 13 is good. And that means there's very little paint on the brush. This will give you a nice, so if I'm using a yellowish color here, it's going to give me more of a skin tone. If I'm using a slightly orange color, but a very vibrant orange color, the amount of water that's in there now, very little paint, a lot of water, works like traditional. It looks like skin color. And that's how you do it with traditional. If you want to get a skin color, you do what I'm doing here. You use pure colors, translucent colors, no white or anything like that. And to get the skin color, you mix basically red and yellow together, and that's it. And then a little bit of blue. That's key. That's what kind of dilutes it or neutralizes it to look more like skin tone. Anyway, so I just wanted to show that. Let's go back here. And so you can see there, as I start adding a little bit of the purples in here, which has blue in it, that starts to neutralize it a bit. And here I have more blues and stuff. I want it more exaggerated. And I can go over this with different amount of layers. And it's all about layering it up. As you layer over it, you can dry it and then go over again with another layer. And glaze, you can even do glazes with watercolor. Works great. So let's go ahead and skim through this to another part here. So I'm doing that same technique over and over again. So like for example, when I want to do this little area in her eye, so here's the forehead, and if I want to do this little bit of area in her eye, I just wet that down, wet the area I want to work on with water, and hit the damp button. Then I start adding my colors. I just add a little bit of yellow or whatever, let it wash into there. Add a little bit of blue and let it wash into there, and so forth. And add a little bit of every color that I want in the skin tone. And then what I start doing is I start adding less water, so that way it doesn't spread as much. That is less water on my brush. 40 will spread nice and good throughout that area. But if you only want it to spread in a small little area, like you want it to have a nice gradient flow, let's say I only wanted the dark to be right here, but this is all damp right here, like see everything that's damp right now. But I only want my dark to be right here, I don't want it to spread further than that. Then I would paint only right here, and I know it's going to flow with the water, and I would turn my water all the way down to like 13 as well. So load will be at 8, water will be like at 13. And I'll just lightly brush in some color right there, and it'll spread and fade out and have a nice gradient to it. So here, because I have more water on the brush, it's going to spread more. As you can see there, it's spreading more out And you can still see, right now, you remember you're seeing the pencil underneath it as well. And now adding a little bit of that purple color, which has blue in it, and that starts to neutralize the other colors I'm working with. The cool color neutralizes the warm colors. Notice a lot of purple in here. I don't use pure black. If I do, it's on top of color, so it's blending with colors. When I work with watercolors, same thing with oil, is I like to work with I like to make my black out of basically red and blue, or burnt umber and ultramarine blue, basically. And same thing with watercolors. This makes a really nice, vibrant black color, and it mixes really good with other colors as well. So as you can see there, it starts to blend out just little by little. And I'm trying to see if I go to a part here where I turn it down. I don't think I had to turn it down yet because I didn't need that much control. Alright, so let's go ahead and speed through this here. So here's an example where I have it both turned down. And you can see where I'm adding right here because I don't want it to spread much. So my water is at 7, my load's at 7. This is all damp right here. This whole section right here is all damp. Notice as I just add a little bit of color there, it only spreads out in that little bit of area. See, it's spreading out, but it's not spreading out far. It's only going a little bit of area. So when you want to really work on a certain area and just have a little bit of it be hit with color and have it see it blends out in just that local area, even though all this is damp, it doesn't spread all the way out. It stops. And that gives you nice control over adding, different shapes. So like for portraiture, you really want to control where you want that color at, and what you want that to be a localized shape, like right here and right here. What's really cool about watercolor to me is because of the translucency of the colors, and as you build them up as it's still working wet on wet, you get a really nice vibrant look to your colors, and it's really good for everything. I mean, skin tones just come out absolutely amazing. Yeah. Oh yeah, by the way, finally at the age of 40 years old, I'm able to grow a mustache. So, oops, sorry about that. And I'm going to be shaving it. I don't really care for, I mean, I like facial hair. It looks cool, but I don't think it looks sexy, if that makes any sense. And my wife agrees with me. So, yeah, I think every man looks better without facial hair as far as how good looking they look. But I like facial hair. It looks badass. It looks like right now I think I kind of look like a biker or something. I don't know. That's just kind of when I look in the mirror, that's kind of what it looks like to me. But yeah, so, but I think every guy looks better without facial hair. That's my point. Better looking, not necessarily like, I mean, the cool factor. Like I like when I do comic books, I like drawing nice, cool looking facial hair because it looks cool. It just doesn't look like better looking. Now I want to show what that starts to look like. Now this is just one layer right here. Now when this blend tool, if you blend it while it's still wet, especially if you blend it while it's paused and then unpause it, you get a nice soft edge. So there's some watercolor artists, and I like to work with nice soft edges, and so there are a few of us that work with watercolor that really like some of these soft edges that almost can look like airbrush because it's so soft. And how you get that look with traditional watercolor, there's a couple different ways to do it, working wet on wet and then controlling how it comes in here. That's kind of what I'm simulating here. But also with another technique that I like to use, which is where you lay, let me go ahead and play this while I'm talking for this part, where you lay down a little bit of watercolor, and then after the watercolor is laid down, then you go and dip it and clean in water, and then you want to wipe it on your towel like 5 times so that it's just barely damp. You take that nice clean damp brush, and you go right on the edge where you're blending the watercolor out, and you just kind of lift some of the paint and then kind of pull it out into the water. And then once you do that, you want to clean the brush again and wipe it off. You just damp, clean brush again, and you keep doing that, and you can have a nice gradient. You can pull your color around and shape it however you want, and it works really good. And it gives that nice soft edges. So I'm doing that here with the program. That's pretty much it. Those are the main techniques that I use here to get a nice, realistic, traditional, translucent feel. Notice I put the water in here where I want to work, and then I hit the damp button so it's all the same wetness. And then I start working with my different settings of a brush. So, low loading. Now about 35% water. And you'll get a feel for how much water you want on there. Typically, if you want a lot of control, go down, little paint, little water, and you have a lot of control with the localized area where you want that color. Now if you want localized color, but you want it to be dark, then have the water be down low, so like at 6 or so 7, maybe a little bit higher, and then have your loading be more around 20 or 30. Now you're going to get a nice dark color instantly, but it's only going to spread locally to that little area where you start to brush it. And you always got to think it's going to spread a little bit bigger than you're working, so always make your shapes a little bit smaller than what you actually want them. And if you want a smoother look, go ahead and grab this tool right here while it's still wet and just start blending out the edge as it's spreading. Now I recommend pausing it, hit the pause button, blend out the edge, and then unpausing, you'll just see it blend nice and smooth. It's really nice. And it's so convincing, this software. So look at right there, look at that. And that looks like watercolor, it's just amazing. And even the paper looks real, and we're zoomed in a lot right now, but it just looks so realistic, and it's so convincing that I submitted it to a very on Facebook, as very anal people, all about everything has to be absolutely translucent. And I submitted another piece that looked a little more opaque because I did use some of the white in there, and you absolutely cannot use any sort of opaque colors in that group, or they'll take your work down, and they're just really anal about that. You know, some people like that with watercolors, whatever. But this was so convincing that no one even questioned whether or not it was real watercolor. The only thing they questioned is whether or not, and not in this piece actually, no one questioned anything about it, not whether it was real or fake watercolor, not whether I used opaque, because it looks totally translucent, because it is translucent, that's how I'm working. But anyway, with another piece that was I had a little bit of an opaque look to it in some parts because I did use some of the white in the program. Anyway, so basically the only problem they had is they said that you can't use opaque colors in this group. But no one questioned the authenticity of its watercolor. Everyone was convinced it was a real watercolor. That, you know, no one even questioned whether it was real or not. So that's how convincing this software is. And keep in mind, this is a very strict group. So if they thought that it wasn't real watercolor, they'd be like, "This is no digital." You know, that would piss them off more than using opaque colors. And so it was kind of funny because that's why I submitted it, because I knew they would pick up on the opaqueness, but I wanted to see will it pass the test of their criticism of being watercolor? Will they even think that it was not real? And this program is absolutely amazing. You're just not going to get this with any other program that I've ever seen. Now here, and there's also advantages too of this, obviously, as you just saw there. When I'm all done, I can make everything less saturated if I want to. If I feel like, oh man, I put too much saturation on that. Now you can kind of do that too with traditional watercolor. Let it dry. If you're working with skin tones, just do a very water with very little pigment of blue over that skin tone, and that's going to neutralize it, so make it look more less saturated. So that is one trick you can use. And so I'm going to go ahead and, so there it is with the pencils turned off. And as you can see, look at this. This isn't even done yet, but everything looks so authentic and real, and everything just blends together so well. Like I said, it's not close to being done. Let's go ahead and get another file here. So what I wanted to show was toward the end here, just really quickly before we move on to some of these others. I'm just going to fly through a lot of them and just point out some other tips and pointers here. That's the basic idea. I mean, if you just follow what I already said right now, that's how you're going to paint. Now, I want to do like a real-time tutorial eventually showing you how to watercolor with this. But basically, this is for those that already know how to do traditional, so they can pick up on everything I'm saying and do that. And even you can too, even if you never work with watercolors. And this is so much easier to work with because there's no cleanup, and not that watercolors is that big of a deal to work with, like as far as, you know. Now this is all done using the exact same technique. Everything is kept over here on the right hand side. Nothing is, no white. In other words, I never move off of this right hand side, so it's all pure color. It's, you know, somewhere between pure color and with some black added to it. And that's one thing that's cool about the software too, is you don't have to worry about mixing your own black, because you just go down as dark as you want with that color and you're good to go. So when I want to add, you know, darker red in here, I just take red and move it down on the dark side, and that's basically adding black to my red, but it's actually a red black. So it's not pure black, and I'm never using pure black even in the software. But look at all this skin tone. So this girl, so here I stuck more with a more saturated skin tone. with Jesus, I went with darker skin tones, and I just basically used a darker orange color and just went more down toward the black as my base color, and then built everything else on top of that, going darker and darker, then going red and darker, then going a little bit purple and darker, and then finally a little bit of blue mixed in there as well to kind of to neutralize it. And here I'm going to show how I do that really fast. So here I add in that color right there, and everything just blends out. It's very, very light. There's a lot of water. Notice it's damp, a lot of water in the brush, very little paint, you know, only 13. And then I start adding more color to it in the parts that I know are going to be darker. And I just kind of let it blend out. Now you can see the water. See, look, you can actually see the water working. See how it's still moving back and forth? It's hitting the edge and coming back, hitting the edge, coming back, filling the area. So now I add a little bit of purple, which kind of it neutralizes it. I'm going to let all that mix around. And what that does, as it mixes around and mixes together, all those colors now are mixing together, becoming one color, with some of it a little bit more localized than others. That gives me a nice base tone to work with. And this leg is further in the back, so it's not going to be as light as the leg up front. So I want this leg further in the back, more shadow. Not as much light's hitting it, so even the brightest color isn't going to be as bright as this up here. And then you just what you start doing, as you want to start adding more details, you don't want it to spread as much. You turn the water down, and and still have low load and low water, and that allows you to work more locally to where it only spreads in that little bit of area where you're painting, and that allows you to control the shapes that you're going for. And you can keep turning that down, the amount of wetness. So it's almost like working like a dry on damp, kind of. And notice that color just blends really nicely. Anyway, with her, what I did is every time I added the base tone, and I'll show this, but every time I add the base tone, which is like a kind of a between red and yellow, so kind of an orangish color, and more toward the top here, very bright, I would add that in, and while it's still moving around and it's still shifting in the program, it's still blending out with the water, mixing with the water, I'll paint in a little bit of blue, and the blue will mix in with that color and it'll neutralize it, and that's how you get this more desaturated skin tone. That is a more kind of a realistic skin tone. Not, you know, there's no white at all in her skin tone. Let's go and just go to toward the end here, if I can kind of just show you what I mean here. So here's where I was almost done. I think I can't remember if I recorded the rest of this or not. I can't remember if I caught it on camera. And all the wings and stuff took a long time. This headdress took a long time too. That took the longest, I think, of everything else. But notice how she's a lot more saturated than she is. Now, I end up turning down the saturation anyways, but she looks much more natural, and she looks much more like colorful. And it's just a matter of style, you know, but I wanted them to have slightly different skin tones. And notice that her skin tone looks very, very realistic. And how I did that was not by adding anything in it but primary colors. So again, it's just using this orange color way up here at the top, and then using a blue, which is right about here, way up here at the top, mixing those together, let them blend together with the water, and we'll go ahead and show what that looks like. So like I said, this has a lot of different meanings to it. Let's go ahead and go with part number 2. I'm just going to fly through each one of these now, so we just kind of get an idea of what I do. And I want to stop on some parts here and there. So this was kind of fun here, you know, how I decided to do the metal. So here, what's kind of cool is this is like so much faster using the marquee tool. It's so much faster than using a mask. So with airbrushing and any sort of painting, but mainly with airbrushing and watercolor, you can use acetate and then cut out the shape you want, and then let the watercolor just work in that area only. And then peel it off when it's dry, blow dry it real fast and peel it off, and you have nice sharp edges, and it looks really cool. This is good for painting certain things like metal and things like that. And I might actually show part of this in real time right here. So it's still damp. This whole entire section is damp. And now look at, now it doesn't show it, but anyway, I turned the water down. I mean, it does show, I just missed it over here. What I do is I'll end up turning the water way down if I want really control over everything. And here, a low load, low water. In this case, actually, the water is kind of higher, but I think I dried it already. I can't remember now. And then just do that right over it. Let me go ahead and go into a new one here, just so I can show you. Right. Okay, so I can kind of see this. So first, I just add, you know, almost black. And notice it looks very light. That's because, look at, a load 5. There's very little paint on that brush, and there's mostly just water on it. And then now I'm adding a little bit of yellow, just adding a little bit of color here and there to show like some of the colors that are blending in with it and around it and its surroundings. This right here is all I wanted to show right here. So I have the load up higher now because I wanted a dark color right away, and I just put it right in there where I want it, but I think I already dried it and I'm working wet on dry, and that's another technique you can use too if you want to get this more hard line look. And then you can actually use the eraser while it's still damp. Before you dry it, use the eraser when it's still wet, and it'll look like you're lifting it, like how you lift with a tissue. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get past all that. And so here I'm going to just show this technique being used on Jesus' face here. So I have that. Well, let's go back to the water. I'll just go through this one more time really fast here. So first I add in the water with the water tool. Then I hit the damp button so it's all the same wetness. Then I'm going to add in my color. So I'm picking kind of leaning more toward the red, and coming down here is a little bit darker. And this will be the base color that I work with. And I'm going to put it right where I want all the shadows to be first. That's why I like working. I like working out all the difficult parts with pen and pencil, or with an under drawing, whatever. It's just easier than try to work that out while you're painting. This way, all I have to do is think about the painting technique and the brush strokes and how all that's going to look and the color and stuff. And because I already did all the thinking about form and light and shadow, which takes a lot of thinking. So I recommend separating those two in your head, and that goes with any kind of painting. I like to work out all my lights and shadows in black and white first, and like pencil or something, and then go over that with my paints. Just paint right over that. And yeah, it takes a little bit longer to do a nice drawing or sketch like that, just to cover it up, but it just takes all that thinking out. Now when I'm doing the painting goes by a lot faster because all I have to think about is my technique and brush strokes and things like that. So here, unless I'm doing like a landscape or something, landscape I don't have to think as much like with other forms. See, now I'm adding this red, right? So, and notice I'm turning the water down. So I turn the water down when I don't want it to spread as far. I want to try to keep this more local in this area right here. And now I'm adding this I'm going more towards purple. It's not quite purple yet, but it's going toward purple. And that allows it to have more of a neutral color, as you can see there. And it just, notice it's only blending out in that local area where I put the actual colors. It's still wet on wet. It still has that nice gradient look to it, that nice smooth edges. It just all, blends in together so nicely, but with texture, not like, airbrush or something. It doesn't look like fake or weird or plastic. It looks good and organic and nice. Notice that one spread out a little bit farther over to here, and now and also the harder you press down, the more it spreads out. Look at that. Look how much like watercolor that looks. Did you see that? That looks like watercolor. It's amazing. I've never seen that before, and like I said, I love watercolors traditionally. So to be able to work finally digitally with watercolor is just, it's awesome. And the future is here. And so as you can see here, as I continue working wet on wet, all I have to do is adjust how much water is on my brush, how much paint on my brush, and that determines how much spread I'm going to get and all that kind of stuff. We'll kind of fast forward some of this here. You can kind of see the general idea what I'm doing here. All the same thing. Now I'm adding, a lot of that there is wet on dry. So I dry it, and then I take a brush that has about 47% water, or water at 47 or so, sometimes 30, and add a little bit more loading on it so I don't have to make as many strokes to add in the not lines, but to add in that darker value, like where eyelids and things like that are, and eyebrows and so forth. And that adds that detail that I want. And same thing I did here for the facial hair. Now look at that right there. I did that so fast too, like in relative quickness. And look at that. Look how much detail it has to it, even though I didn't do a lot of work. But it has so much detail to it. This looks really, really nice. And really it's just a few brush strokes here and there on wet technique with watercolor. It's absolutely amazing. And you can do that same thing with real watercolors, and it's awesome. Same kind of thing. And notice how, look how many colors I add. This is really, I think, important. No matter what medium you're working with, try to use a lot of colors for, you still want it to look like it's a local color, but you can get away with adding a lot of color to that local color. So let's say you're doing a red apple, you can add a lot of colors. I even throw some green strokes in my red apple sometimes, or in something red. So if there's any green in the surroundings at all in my painting, I'll even throw some green strokes in there here and there, or some yellow strokes here and there, and it just blends right in. It still looks like it's a red apple if it was an apple, for example. And so this hair is still going to look dark. Now here, the technique, I think I dried the paper, then I'm going back in with more paint loaded on and a decent amount of water, and that just gives me a nice local, it only just blends right in that little area. It gives me that kind of watercolor edge look to the line work. It's not really lines, but it's like gives that watercolor, I don't know, if you work with watercolors, you know what I'm talking about. And it looks just like watercolor, it just has that nice watercolor edge. All right, let's go on to the next one. So we're at 30 minutes now, so we're going to go in and breeze through the rest of this here. Just going to kind of show the process, and then we'll talk about some things. Now, if you're working with a big file, like this was a really big file, and so working on this big of an area sometimes doesn't work so good because it takes a long time for the color to blend back and forth with all that water. There's a lot of processing happening there. Now, if it's a smaller file, and I reckon, you really don't have to work on a big file. Let's say you want to print out at poster size. You can still work at 8.5 by 11 at 300 dpi and get poster size through deviantart.com. It's going to come out looking pretty good. But if you want it to look absolutely awesome, as if you painted it at poster size, how do you do that? Because there's no way you're going to be able to paint, unless you want to paint little pieces at a time. This software is not, no software really is going to let you do that poster size with big brushes and big area, but especially this watercolor simulation, it's not going to allow you to cover that big area like that. So how do you do that? Here's a trick. Awesome trick. I'm going to let this play while I talk about this trick real quick. So work at 8 by 11, or even work at whatever size that you can print out on your printer that you can take a photograph of. So you can work at 7 by 5. And that will be lightning fast when you're working at 7 by 5. And then print it out on photo paper, something that's not too glary or glossy, though, something that you can pick up with the camera really nicely. Then take a good camera and put it on a pod and everything, and zoom in on it to where you get a nice, perfect picture of that picture. And make sure you get like a 4K picture, or just a really, really high resolution, more than 4K, a super high resolution photograph, as high as resolution as you need in order for it to be big enough for a poster, so you have enough pixels there. Take a really good photograph of it, and then take that file and put it into Photoshop or whatever, and then you print with that, and it looks seamless. It looks as though it's awesome. And what you can do, what's really cool about that, is you can determine how much detail is in there. So let's say you did an oil painting, and you don't want all that texture to be there in the oil painting. Like let's say you're actually working on canvas, and you don't want all that texture to be there on. And by the way, I'm letting this play so you can see the techniques. You can look at here how I mess around with the amount of water, amount of paint, and I can really start to paint in here and get that look I want, where it's just blending in that local area right there. See, it's only going to blend in that local area. And I'm going to get a lot of color value and value and color and hue changes in here to really get that nice realistic look. But anyway, so let's say you're working on canvas and you don't want all that texture to be there in the final version. That is, you want when someone walks up close to your painting, that is your print of your painting, you don't want them to see all your messy brushwork, let's say. I love that, but let's say you don't want them to see that. You don't want them to see all the texture and all that kind of stuff. So what you do is you use a camera that's very, very high, has a lot of pixels to it. You take a picture of it from farther away, but to where the whole thing's in the camera. So let's say take a picture of it where you want it to look like, about 3 feet away. Take a picture of it from 3 feet away. Don't zoom in on it. Don't use any sort of zoom. Just make sure it all fits into the frame as much as possible. So that way you're using most of your picture area is mostly your painting. And when you print that out, it's going to look, even if someone gets right up close to it, a foot away from it, it's still going to look as though they're looking at it from 3 feet away. They're never going to see all the details that you can see in the painting when you get really up close to it. Now, if you want them to see all that detail, then make sure to take the photograph up close. And sometimes if it's a big painting, this is what's cool about doing a small painting. So notice all the texture and stuff there. If I want all this texture to show through and I print this out, I just get the camera really close to my printout. And all this texture and stuff is in that, like the watercolor paper texture, all that's going to be in the printout. And so if I get my camera really close to it and take a picture, and I can only do that when it's really small, then I'm going to get all that texture. So when you print it out big and you get close to it, you're going to see all that awesome texture. If you take it from farther away, but make sure it's all on the camera, like a big painting, you're not going to get all that texture when you get close to it. And this was a bummer when I bought these Frank Frazetta prints. I was kind of bummed out because I was hoping to see all of his brushwork and stuff when I got close to it, but you can't, because they took the picture too far away from the original painting. And it looks really nice and everything, but when I get up close to it, I can't see all his brushwork and all that. It's kind of a bummer. I really wanted, I love that. I love being able to see brushwork. It's just awesome. Like a nice, you know, Rembrandt painting where you can see all how much paint he had. It's just, you see it up close and in person, it looks crazy good. I love that look though. But from 3 feet away, you can't see all that. Anyway, so that's a cool trick. And that's how you can get a poster size painting. So yeah, just keep that in mind. You don't have to work with big files in order to get nice prints to your customers or for yourself, for your family, whatever. Just keep that in mind. Work at 7x5 or whatever, and then just get your camera as close as you want or as far as you want in order to have less or more detail in the final printout. You can mess around with, you know, take one really close, take one more farther away, and that way you can get, you know, different amounts of detail in there. That is in the final version. So yeah, that's pretty much that. And the same thing goes with, oh, and by the way, with your canvas painting, if you want all that, you know, detail in there or whatever, you know, if it's a big painting, you're probably going to have to take it in sections and stitch it together, and so it's nice and seamless. There's different ways to do that because you need the camera pretty much a foot away or up close. If the camera's that close, it's not going to be able to see a huge painting. You know, it's not going to be able to see it all. But if you pull away to where you can see all that, most likely you're not going to see as much detail with the brushwork and stuff. Here I actually did some tinting there. I don't know if you saw that. I felt like this was too bright, and so I just didn't, on a separate layer, just added that water right on top of it, and I can go and I can blend out these edges with this tool here, and that will just blend it out nice and seamless. I do that later where I blend it in, and what that did is it knocked back the values. The values weren't so bright here. But look at this. As all this works together, it starts to, you know, come together and it looks really nice. You just keep layering it on like that, little bits at a time. Notice I add this pure blue right there, and it like neutralizes that color. It blends right into it. Doesn't look blue because the two colors are mixing together, and the blue is neutralizing the warmer colors, and so it kind of adds a more neutral skin tone rather than so vibrant and saturated. I end up fixing all this right here later too. Right now it's just too blue and purple, and I'm just going to kind of speed this up so you can see the process, just layering and layering and layering. And look at that, as I continue to layer, you see it starts to look really, really nice there. A lot of form. Form is what gives you realism, not detail. You know, noodling all this little detail, every little freckle, every little indent in the skin. That's like hyperrealism, but realism comes from form. It really that is the values where you have where the light directly hits the object and where the light cannot directly hit the object. And you get your shadows, and having that light and shadow and the different values, that's what gives you realism. That's what I always focus on. I did want to show the hands because this was really cool right here, what I did with the hands. And so I started out with this, you know, just look at, it's almost like a orangish yellow, and it's way at the top, so very, very saturated, but notice not that much paint's on the brush, 15. And I have a lot more water, 58. I try to stay under 50. Sometimes I go a little bit higher. And then after I have that color in there, I'm going to go, I think at this point I go right in with red right away. Because I want the tips of the fingers to be warmer than everything else. And so that part, I think I can speed that part up here. Yeah, so I had the warm color. Now I'm adding a purple, look at this, for the line work. Not line work, but for where the shadows are going to be. So I'm using this, well, not really quite purple, but I'm starting to move toward purple. It's more like a fuchsia, but Because there's so much black in it, it works great. It's more desaturated because of the black, and that adds this really nice shadow tone. I use that same technique too with oils and stuff. Works great. And look at that. Because I'm using less water, only 11 water, I can just put the color right where I want it, and it doesn't spread out very much. It just only spreads that local area. And I'm still working with it with the paper damp, so it's still wet on wet. And look at that. So look how much it's already starting to look like skin tone, even though I'm using pure color. I'm not using anything over here. I'm not using anything that looks like skin tone. All these colors by themselves do not look like skin tone. But because it works like watercolor, it's so transparent. If I have very little paint on the brush and more water, it works just like I can layer it on top of each other, and it gets darker and darker as it layers. And because of that translucency that watercolor has, and this program simulates it so well that, as you can see, as that translucency builds up, I'm starting to get each color is seen through each other, and they're building on top of each other, and you can see through each color, like layers of just very slightly colored glass. If you take a translucent yellow glass and a translucent red glass and overlap them, you get orange, right? And so as these layers are overlapping each other, you get these different colors showing through, and it's really nice. And so now I'm adding, I think now I might have dried it, and now I'm adding, that's how I'm getting these nice, see the watercolor edges? That's doing a more wet on dry technique. And but look at that. I mean, that hand from a distance, look how good that, I mean, to me, it looks really good. It looks like I was really liked how the colors came out there, and how I used some more desaturated like blue in here and stuff, and it really just, you know, mixed with the colors really nicely, and it gives you a nice look. And I'm going to show the other hand as well. So because I'm adding black, but I'm pulling it down, and it's the color with black added to it, that's already desaturating it. So you can add blue right away, like, you know, up here. So when you add this color way up here, and then you add blue way up here as well, those two together will neutralize each other. I use that on the other lady. But with her, I want her skin tone a little bit different. You can also neutralize it by just dropping it down to black, and that's going to make it more desaturated. So that's another thing you do. Either way works really good, as you can see here at the hands. Now look at, I'm adding blue, but notice very desaturated. And I'm just adding it right in there on top of the skin tones. And because these work well together, the end result is a color. And that's one of the symbolisms, by the way. A lot of people are you know, oogie boogie about 666, but there's actually a lot of meaning behind everything. I put a lot of thought to this painting before I decided to paint it. A lot of thought into it. There's layers and layers of meaning here, and I like to let people figure that out when I paint my symbolism. But look at that hand. Looks really good. See how good it looks? Like how realistic that looks? Very desaturated, not too, you know, the nice, you know, I love it. It's just great. Watercolor is awesome for skin tones. And this program just simulates it so well. These are creatures I developed for this collection. So I've been working on this. Here, let's go ahead and watch this in real time real quick. I've been working on, we can just kind of see what I do here with the colors and how they blend together. It really makes a nice hand. It just makes nice skin tones in general. But the idea behind this was I wanted to develop these creatures that were kind of like, how do I explain this? So anyway, I developed these creatures, and they have like these weird hair. It's not really hair, it's like headdresses. And it kind of like, some of it just grows right out of their head. And there's different stages of evolution on Earth with these. It's basically, you know, synthetic people in the future, and how synthetic people become more and more human. But then after they become so human, they kind of want to differentiate themselves from humans, and so they start to like have just hair, synthetic hair, just kind of, at first it's synthetic hair growing off that kind of resembles hair, but almost like blades of plastic or metal coming off their head, but kind of resembling a hairstyle. And then they start getting more and more abstract with it as they evolved and started differentiating themselves more from humans, and started embracing their synthetic side. And they start looking more and more, or less and less human as they do that. And these ones some of them like took on this kind of religious thing and kind of wanted to look more like religious figures, and so they started having these like synthetic metallic looking wings and stuff coming off them. That's where this idea right here came from. But yeah, you know, and then obviously the fact that Jesus is there has a lot of meaning to it, and I'll show you the final painting too in the beginning and also here at the end, because there's other stuff happening on the ground that adds a lot more meaning to the overall piece. But anyway, so the collection, what's cool about it is each individual painting stands alone as its own work and has layers of meaning, but the whole collection has layers of meaning too, and there's an evolution of this species, an evolution of human species along with them. It spans a big span of time where they're just getting started, but they look very, very human. And then as the synthetic people, you know, evolve and change themselves to look less and less human over time, and then there's like something happens to the earth, maybe a war or something like that. But now in some of the paintings, it's like post-apocalyptic type era where the synthetic people, anyway, it's just really cool. So kind of like there's an overarching theme through the whole collection as well. I've never seen anything like that before, so I thought that'd be cool. There's meta meaning but behind the entire collection itself. So you flip to the collection, it's almost gonna see like time. I'm gonna put it in a certain order to where there's every painting is in its proper timeline in the order of, as you're flipping through the book, you'll be seeing the order in which they're in the timeline. And I might actually even make a story out of it. I also write, so I might actually like write like a short little story that goes along with it, and to go in the back of the book, just to kind of tell like what I told you just now. So adding, you know, almost just pure red in here. It's not like a really, really vibrant red, but adding red into the corners of the fingers sometimes is really, really great. And even in like eyes and things like that. But look at that. See, from a distance, it looks great. Reads well. Colors on top of colors rather than so much blending. But watercolors naturally are a blending medium. But still, I like to have sometimes just solid colors on top of each other that read well. So here you can see, let's see if I, right there. So here I added in some like almost like a purplish color right into the skin tones. And look at, I let it bleed into it so they kind of mix together where the shadows are. And then I add some more red on top of that. So I add a bunch of colors while they're still bleeding together, while I still have a good amount of water on the brush. So all those colors kind of bleed together, and it gives me more of a desaturated skin tone. So it's absolutely great. Like, you can do this with real watercolor too, but I'm just so happy that it works on this program as well. That is, you can do an entire painting with just your primary colors, primary watercolors. That is yellow, red, well, maybe not all your, and a couple more. These are the colors I would work with personally. And I've done a lot of paintings with just these colors in watercolor and not doing much mixing of them. So like, for example, first flesh tone, I would just mix pure red and pure yellow, and then a little touch of blue, and that's it. And then water, and then maybe a little bit of burnt umber with ultramarine. That would be my black, or you can just use black if you want to, like Mars black or something. But I don't know if they make Mars black for watercolor. Whatever black, ivory black, I think they make that for watercolor. Anyway, it's a black that's not true black anyway, so it's usually made with other colors. But I'm telling you, try it with any paint. Just try mixing burnt umber, not burnt sienna. You can try burnt sienna to get a lighter color black, but burnt umber mixed with ultramarine blue, or even try phthalo blue. But I think ultramarine works really well. Mix those two colors together in pretty much equal amounts. You get a nice looking black, and it has a lot. It mixes with a lot of colors very, very well. I should be playing this while I'm talking. But yeah, so red, period, primary yellow, primary red, primary blue, or ultramarine blue is the blue I like to use. You can use both phthalo blue and ultramarine blue to get different types of colors. Then use either, you know, ivory black, Mars black, or if you don't want to use black, because I don't like using black personally, use burnt sienna in your mix. So you already have the ultramarine blue, so now you just have that fourth color, which is burnt sienna. Now if you're working with oils, you add titanium white, because you're going to be using white with oil paints. With watercolor, you don't need to do that. With watercolor, you just use more water. And you can get, look how much this looks like light skin tone, but there's no white in there. you're just using the transparency of the watercolor with the waters and letting colors, you know, blend together and then mix on top of each other. So this color was achieved with just, on this program, I can just put it as orange. That's like mixing, if you're working traditionally, that's mixing yellow and red together. Boom, now you got your orange. Dropping a drop of blue in there. Look at, now I'm adding some blue, letting it blend right into there. Watch, as the blue bleeds out, it just desaturates this color and doesn't look like blue at all, because it's still wet, so it's just blending right in there. So add a touch of blue, and that now desaturates the skin tone so it doesn't look so bright. And then you just add a lot of water to it and get a nice light color, and just add less and less water, more and more pigment, and start building it up. And then add a little bit more red to that mixture as you add more shadows. Add a little bit of blue, a little bit of purple to it, in order to take red and blue, mix those together. Now add that to your main skin tone that you've already made, and start adding that to the shadows. And it's the same thing I'm doing here, and you just kind of build that up with layer and layer, getting darker and darker, starting from the lightest values and getting darker and darker and darker, and it just adds a really, really nice, you know, awesome skin tones to the end piece. But yeah, you can do that with watercolor, and it's absolutely fantastic, and just using those colors. So you don't need all these crazy colors to paint with. You can make any color with those colors, by the way. Alright, so let's go ahead and continue on here. So as you can see, just adding these different colors there. Look at that. Looks like watercolor. Looks awesome. Same thing here. Just following I'm just rinse and repeat, area by area, piece by piece. Just doing the exact same, exact same technique. Now you might be wondering, how do you keep the consistency of your colors? You can actually make a, go down exactly where you want it at, and then make a, what's it called? I know it does it in here. What do they call it when it's a little square of color? Swatch. Sorry, color swatch. I think this program lets you make color swatches. You just click on here and you can do the color swatches. So you can make some color swatches, and that way you can just always pick that exact color, or somewhere on your file, or even on a separate file. I think this one allows you to have a reference file, or whatever, a separate file, or just have have your paper be a little bit bigger than the final piece, and on the border just put in your main colors in there, and then you can just color pick them. That way it's always going to be exactly the same. I didn't do that. I just trust my eye, and I just boom, go to it. Now when I'm working traditionally, what I'll do, go ahead and play this while I'm talking real quick. When I'm working traditionally, let's go ahead and, I think I went backwards here. Sorry about that. I'll go show how I did the face real quick. And then the hand. Okay, I just played that file. Sorry about that. So when I work traditionally, what I do, oh, actually I did have this file. Okay, I didn't know I had this one. So this is how I actually started the painting. So I guess I did start from the beginning. Cool. And I just kind of let those blend together. And so that's how I got that beginning part. And that's just, one, there's a bunch more layers that go over that. Alright, so with traditional watercolors, and here you can start, now you can start to see some of the sketch I have down here. More of the meaning. There's UFO, empty cross, two men on crosses next to it. So you kind of figure out what's happening there. Here, I'm using different techniques. I actually found a technique that works with this program that works almost identical to using like a tissue, the tissue method, and pulling the color back. So you paint some of your color, and while it's still damp, you pull the color off. You lift the color away with the tissue, getting the edge of your cloud, and then you take a damp brush and kind of blend out some of the edges and blend back into that some of the other color, and you keep layering that effect and get a nice layer effect with clouds. It looks really good with watercolor, and I actually found a way to pretty much simulate that with this program, but let's go ahead and get past all that because it's kind of boring. Although I might show how to paint clouds in Rebelle 3 watercolor clouds at a future time. So anyway, so with what I do is I'll take my base skin tone. I'll make a base skin tone. This one thing that's beneficial with not working with pan watercolors is making a custom color for a painting. So if you're working with pan colors, it can be kind of difficult because you have to kind of remember, okay, I swiped this much yellow on my brush, how much paint did I have on it. You can never get it perfect. And you put a little bit of yellow down, because let's say you make your base color, you run out of it, because you're going to keep running out of it, right, with pan colors. You want to, that is, you mix a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red, and a touch of blue, and that gives you your base skin tone. Well, how do you get that same color every time with pan inks? Pan watercolor is really hard. That's the hard watercolor. We have to activate it with water. And so yeah, I'm pretty good at it, but it took a lot of practice to get there. But you can take the color and just kind of get a feel for it, and put it in there, take a little bit of red, mix it together. You kind of get a feel for that color and know that, okay, that's really close to what I had before. Add a touch of blue, put a little test strip next to your just a little test stroke next to what you're already working on, and make sure it kind of matches that base tone. If it does, you can already tell, do I need a little bit more blue? Anyway, what's cool about working with tubed watercolor paint is you can actually squeeze out a little bit of yellow, squeeze out a little bit of red, squeeze out just a little bit of blue, mix all those together, and then add a little bit of water to it, or add a lot of water to it, and then do a test on it, make sure it's the right color. And once it's the right color, now you have your own pan. You can actually let that dry. Now you have your own pan swatch that you just made traditionally. That's always going to be the exact same color every time for the whole entire painting or for mini paintings. And that's the main benefit, I think, of working with tube watercolors. You get nice consistency. All right, so you can see there, look at that. I added a lot of blue. Where is that at? Right in there. There we go. Look, I added blue right into here. And that neutralizes the color. Now I could have just, added more black, and that will work too. But sometimes I like doing that pure color. Just, it gives a different look to it when you have pure color in there. This has so much blue in it, you'd be surprised. And you'd be surprised how much blue there is in the skin. And that's the mistake a lot of people make, is when they're painting skin tones, they'll add these two colors together. They'll pick an orange color, and then they'll pick it somewhere around here. They'll add a little bit of black, which is kind of like adding blue, because black is naturally the neutralized version of that color, right? And how you do that traditionally, you can add blue to it to make it naturally desaturated. But they kind of pull it down right here, and they paint with that as their base tone. Now, in digital, this is what's great about this program. It allows you to get that. And I would like to just get all my base done with this program, like your base color. Then you can color pick with that and something like Photoshop to make sure, to get your finished painting a nice opaque looking, more like oil looking painting. But what you can do is you can actually add in just a little bit of blue into as you're mixing your colors together, like blend it all together, add a little bit of blue, and just kind of blend it in and just keep blending over it. Some programs like PaintStorm work more like Paint, allow you to do that better than others in Painter, whereas Photoshop not so much. But you can always add a layer, and then just add a little bit of blue to that layer and set it to overlay, or not overlay, that's too strong. Set it to like soft light, and then reduce opacity until it looks like neutralized, and then flatten those layers together, and bam, now you have a nice, more neutral looking skin tone. And also just adding a few very, 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 blue in very subtle ways. Like here, you can almost see the blue, and just kind of fade it here and there towards almost not seeable. And it's just, man, it does so much for skin. But I'm just going to kind of fly through this now, because this video is quite long already. Hopefully you guys, learned a lot about how to use this program and do watercolors with it, because it's absolutely amazing. And I know I still need to do a real-time video of it. Look, everything's the same. I'm just rinse and repeat. I'm just the same exact techniques over and over again for the whole painting. Right here, see how you have this edge right here? When that happens, all you have to do is just use this water tool, put a little bit of water over it, hit the damp button right away. You can even hit the pause button first, add the water. That means the water won't do anything yet. And then hit the damp button, and then hit play, and then take this tool here and just kind of lightly blend it together, and it'll all flow and blend together. That's how I get rid of that line. And it's great. It works awesome. You can do the same thing with traditional watercolors too. If you already had one section that dried, you work on another section. When I get that kind of bleeding line, I just take my brush and damp it, and I just kind of blend them together and reactivate the water color on that's already there. And look at that, it's all blending together nicely. And look at that there. I added water right over this section. That's just the water tool. And then blend out the edges while it's still wet. That way I get a nice seamless blend, and then I can add a little bit of color because I thought this was a little bit too bright. So I can add a little bit of color back into it, and watch, now I add the color, now it's not as bright anymore. So I knocked down the brightness quite a lot there. And there you go. This does take a lot more thinking though to work with just pure translucent colors with watercolor. You have to really think more in layers, start with the lightest color and go darker. What's cool about this program, you can actually put white on top of the colors and it'll go right on top of it, kind of like wash. It kind of feels a lot like wash. And it's also going to look a lot like wash too if you do that. But it's a really cool looking look as well. So there's different looks you can get with this program using the watercolor. Just using the watercolor you can get different looks by what techniques you use. Just showing here that everything's done using that exact same techniques just over and over again. Just section by section using the same techniques. Here I added a lot more blues and purples to the foot. I thought it just looked really, really cool. And I really wanted a lot of shadows. I like working like the old masters. The old masters always had a lot of shadows in their work. Like a lot of contrast in their figures, and I always thought that looked really cool, like Rembrandt and stuff like that, and Caravaggio, I think that's how his name said. Just love that look, so I usually always paint that way myself. There's that back leg, and here's her feet. Look how much blue is there right there. You can actually see that blue. Yet it looks fantastic and it ends up working great. And if you want to, you can always reduce that blue by just adding a little bit more warm over it, another layer of very transparent warm over it, say like an orangish color, and it'll knock it back and make it where you can't really see the blue. So you can go back and forth with that. And then here's the final, just kind of showing what I did if you don't miss it. And I guess I think I'm missing a file somewhere. I think I have another file that I recorded that had the rest of it on there. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. I'll go ahead and show you the final version now. Oh, now here's some of the symbolism paintings I've been working on for my symbolism figure collection. And this one actually is about abortion. And they're done in different styles, so they're not all in the same style, which I think is cool. And some of them are even actually done traditionally. This one's traditional watercolor. Done very small though. I wish I would have done it bigger so I could have got more detail in the body, but still came out nice. So here's the final version. And so as you can see, I did just some very basic rolling hills, and look how much like watercolor it looks. And then the UFO, the light shining down. You can see just really cool how you can just see the detail, and you can see just how much like watercolor it looks. Just crazy. Love the way the hands came out. This one, oh, I actually had the lines going through her hands still. I need to go fix that. That's why I always keep original files just in case I notice something like that later. Very, very basic, for the land, because that's not the focus of the painting. But yeah, so there it is. Great, fantastic. Let's go ahead and look at some of their faces really quick, so you can get some just really good detail with this program. And it really does make it a lot easier to get a lot more detail in faces and stuff with traditional watercolor, to get that kind of detail when it's really small. Like unless you're working on a larger watercolor painting. But if you're just working at standard size watercolor paper, 11 by 17 or something like that, to get this, to get the face, like this was actually I think smaller than that, but to get those details in the face, these faces were really, really tiny. You have to use a really, really very fine pen. I use my Kiritake Japanese ink brush. I think is that technically is for inks, but it works great for watercolors and allows me to get really, really fine detail. But yeah, so alright, so that's pretty much it. This one is one of the recent ones I did. I did this one in actually Photoshop CC, and I wanted it to look like more of traditional, like old school oil painting. Look at all that texture I got in there. I actually painted this fairly quickly. And this one has its, this one pretty simple, I think. It's called Ass for Cash. And I think the meaning is pretty, and there's multiple layers of meaning. Every little thing from the river, everything is there for a reason. But the basic meaning is, people are really like, let's really show my butt and boobs in order to get a lot of views on social media, and with their selfies, whatever, and let's really make my butt really big, and let's go get butt implants and everything else. I got to be like Kim Kardashian, whatever. That's like the surface meaning. There's other layers of meaning to it. But yeah, it's okay. That's it. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and hey, give it a shot. Just try the program. If you love watercolors, or if you ever wanted to watercolor but you felt like traditional is, I don't know, you just can't afford all the materials, whatever. And if you do want to try traditional, get good paper, hands down. You can use cheaper watercolor, you can get away with that. Cheaper brushes, you can get away with that, but you can't get away with using cheaper paper. Use Archies or Archers. Anyway, you just have to use good watercolor paper. If you use cheap watercolor paper, you're gonna be so frustrated and wonder why it's so hard to watercolor. Because it's going to pull up on the water, the paper's going to start pulling and start fraying. Just doesn't take the water right, doesn't blend right, doesn't look right. You're not going to be able to get the techniques that I get because cheap watercolor paper just doesn't allow the water and the color to blend together right. You have to, like, there's a video someone made. It convinced me, like, definitely try a better watercolor paper, and I'm so glad I did, because if I never had done that, I would still be using like something like Strathmore, which is okay, but I struggled so much to get the watercolors to do what I wanted them to. And with good watercolor paper, it just makes that process so much easier. And not only that, I can do things that I can't do on the other paper. It's not possible. Techniques are impossible. All right, so that's pretty much it. I know I said that was it like many times, but it really is, that is it. Please go ahead and thumbs up. Leave a comment if you have any questions about this at all. Ask them in the video below. I appreciate that in the comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible, which is usually pretty quickly. And yeah, just try the software if you're at all interested in watercolor. Hopefully this has piqued your interest. You can just achieve so much with it. Hopefully not very many people are the kind of people that are going to be like, I didn't watch it because there was boobs. They were unproportionate. They're all like that for a reason. All that is part of the symbolism. It's all part of our social conditioning that's happening right now in the world. It's making a statement. It's saying something, and it's not saying something positive, by the way, about it. But anyway, but some people are like, oh, how dare you draw Jesus with an afro or whatever. I mean, if you let yourself get offended by stuff like that, not having tolerance to other people's views, and this isn't even necessarily my view, it's just a view. It's telling a message. It's putting out their ideas. I know there's a lot of views in my symbolism collection that are held by the world, but I don't personally hold to. So that's another thing to think about. But anyway, so if people have such lack of tolerance for other people's views, that's sad. It's too bad that you didn't benefit. You probably didn't get this far anyway. But if some of you did get this far and you still feel like, I don't know, religiously violated, don't. Like, why do that? Who cares? Be tolerant of other people's views. It's not a big deal that they have their own views about things. If they think that Jesus was half alien, who cares if they think that? Why does that matter? It shouldn't matter to you. You know who you believe Jesus is, and that should be all that matters to you. It shouldn't matter that some stranger on the internet thinks that he's I don't think he's half ET necessarily, but just saying, there are people that believe that, or full ET even. There's all kinds of strange views out there about Jesus, and you shouldn't let them bother you. You shouldn't let them offend you. It's really not a big deal. Let people have their own views. They shouldn't be offended that of your views. If we were all more tolerant of each other's views, we'd all get along so much better. And it's unfortunate though that I'm sure there were people that were so offended by the material that they stopped watching, and they didn't get a benefit from hopefully the knowledge in this video that can help you take traditional methods and start painting traditional watercolor digitally. It's absolutely amazing that you can do that. Like, it blows my mind. I never thought that this was the absolute last medium that I ever thought would come close. And it's so close. It looks like the real thing. Absolutely looks like the real thing. Oh yeah, I did want to show you one more thing really fast before I close this out, and that is, let's see here. I wanted to show you, so this was also done in the program, but with this one, I actually used some whites in my colors, and you can see that this looks more opaque in some parts. It looks more like gouache. And with her skin tone, you can see it looks more like maybe like gouache or something. It doesn't quite look like transparent watercolor, and that's because I used that opaque whites within. This is when it's what happens when you add white. It ends up looking more like gouache. It's more vibrant than gouache. It's like gouache after you maybe put a semi-transparent coat over the finished piece. Oh, it does this kind of stuff really good too, where you can actually do drips and everything. It's awesome. It works like real watercolors. You can drip. You can. This was using the blow tool and blowing it. It's just absolutely fantastic. This one actually has a lot of meaning to it too. They all do, but I want to show you one more thing really quick here with watercolors. This was also done using the exact same program. These drips are done in the program in real time. You know, so I get different kinds of drips, and that's all controllable like you would get with traditional. And notice here I get this nice wet, really wet on wet look. Notice here it looks more like gouache. This is using white right on top while it's still damp, and it just kind of blends right into it, and you kind of get like, this was pure white by the way, but notice it doesn't look like pure white. It doesn't look like this. It looks more like gouache because it kind of picks up the colors underneath and kind of blends together into one color, and just really cool. And then I want to show you one more here. This is actually traditional, using more abstract, using watercolor pens. And these are just Aztec. I think it's Aztec is the name of the company. Really cheap, but they actually work pretty good. And when you use them on good paper, they actually they're not bad at all. Oh, this one I wanted to show. Okay, so here you can see that some of it looks just, especially because of the color paper it's on, the more white parts where I added white to the color, you can really see it looks more like gouache. And but all this is all done in real time to get these streaks and stuff like you would with real watercolor. And here you can actually change it as if you flip the thing upside down to get streaks going up. And it's really cool. Look at that. Look how much like watercolor though that looks. It's absolutely crazy. And then this right here looks more like gouache because I added the white. So if I repainted this though using the techniques I just showed you, it would look all like watercolor. You wouldn't see any of this kind of opaqueness to it at all, because I would just use a very little color, a lot of water, and that's how I'd get that same color but transparent without any of the opaque look to it, especially like down in here. Anyway, so that's the difference there. So you can do a lot of stuff with it. You can, and here's another one I did too with the program. And I kept it more abstract. I didn't want to get too detailed. With this tree I got more detail with it because that was like the center of attention. But yeah, I mean, look how much like watercolor it looks. It's crazy. You can see all the texture of the paper and stuff. And you can change the texture of the paper. You can make it less apparent, more apparent. You can make it smaller, bigger tooth, smaller tooth. And it also affects how the water reacts to your paper actually. The bigger the tooth, the more the water gets stuck in the divots. It's really cool. It simulates so much stuff. It's absolutely incredible. Okay, so that's pretty much it. For real this time, for real this time. All right, bye.